Welcome to Kevin and Brian's Horror Drive-In Theater Podcast, where each week we cover the latest horror news, shorts, and 2 creature feature reviews. This week, after the news, we'll cover the old drive-in classic Shudder, followed by our discussion of the short film The Smiling Man, and our horror feature film Birdbox. Stick around here at the drive-in, it's almost fully dark outside. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And let's get on with the news. And first up, this week's news. First story is the first photos and new plot details of Jordan Peele's upcoming horror thriller, Us, have been released.
He's at it again, and it looks good.
Jordan Peele's the same guy who gave us Get Out a year or two ago.
Which was a mighty good film. This one, I think, intrigues me more. I think this one looks better, scarier.
I don't know. I may be like the only person on earth who did not enjoy Get Out. I thought it was boring and very tame for a so-called horror movie.
I didn't think it was very scary. I didn't hate it like you do, but I thought it was overhyped. I mean, for like people talking about how terrifying it was. And
greatest movie of the year, scariest thing I've ever seen.
It was good. Part of the problem was the hypnosis trope, which hypnosis doesn't work like that, and that was heavily reliant on you believing that hypnosis works like that. But this one looks like a genuinely scary horror movie.
Yeah, basically the story of Us. The story of Us.
The story of Us. That's a series.
Yeah. Okay, this one is called Us, and the story is set in the present day and follows Adelaide and Gabe Wilson as they take their kids to Adelaide's old childhood beachside home in Northern California for the summer. After a day at the beach with the Tyler family, Adelaide, who's haunted by a lingering trauma from her past, becomes increasingly more paranoid that something bad will happen to her family.
She's right.
As night falls, the Wilsons see 4 figures holding hands and standing silently at the bottom of the driveway.
And if you watch the trailer, you see that it's them. It's some kind of evil duplicates of them that are coming after them.
Are these replacements or body snatchers or future mirror selves or alternate? We don't know.
We don't know. Looks really good.
So it does. Check out the trailer. Looks interesting. We'll see how that one goes eventually. It's a ways off yet.
Number 2 is another movie that's going to be coming soon. That's in the works, about the Russian sleep experiment.
So the Russian sleep experiment is one of these stories that's been floating around forever. At some point during the Cold War, the Russians took, 5 people?
Yeah, I think it was.
5 volunteers, supposedly criminals, and offered to give them full pardons if they could go like a month or
I think it was 30 days.
30 days without sleeping.
But it depends on what report you look at, because it's kind of an urban legend. It might have happened. It might not have really happened.
There are people who swear it did, and there's people who say, no, it didn't.
Based on true events that might or might not have happened.
So anyway, the Russians gave these 5 people...
It was a sort of gas to keep them awake.
A no-sleep, stay-awake gas.
And locked them in together with some observers, and I guess hilarity ensued in a bad way.
Bad things happened after that, which we haven't seen the movie, so we'll let that go. But that's basically the idea behind the Russian sleep experiment.
Hasn't gone as far as a trailer yet on this, but it's a definite project and sounds interesting.
It could be visually very good with hallucinations and stuff.
Could be genuinely scary.
Yeah. Third story up is Doug Bradley, better known as Pinhead, has written the foreword for an upcoming book, Scared Sacred: Idolatry, Religion, and Worship in the Horror Film, which will be released in 2019. So, we've seen Doug Bradley in numerous movies, mostly the Hellraiser series, but what was the one he did with the Hillbilly family?
You know, Doug Bradley is only one of 6 actors to play the same horror character at least 6 consecutive times.
Well, who else did?
I looked this up because I heard that fact, so I had to find out who the other 5 were. Christopher Lee played Dracula. Robert Englund played Freddy Krueger. Warwick Davis played the Leprechaun. Brad Dourif, who played Chucky, and Tobin Bell in Jigsaw.
Huh.
And Doug Bradley as Pinhead.
I'm surprised there were that few people.
Yeah, only 6 of them have done that many times in a row.
And Brad Dourif mostly was just a voice actor.
Mostly.
Okay, so again, Doug Bradley, who we very clearly remember from most of the Hellraiser movies. He hasn't been on all of them.
But he's done a lot of other stuff, too.
Yeah, the other series was the Wrong Turn series with the family of, I don't know, inbred hillbillies. There were some weird people in that movie, that series of movies.
And that's one of those series of movies where there wasn't any real magic or monsters. It was just real crazy people.
Deliverance taken to the extreme.
Yes.
Okay, our fourth story this week is about an upcoming con. Registrations are now available for attending StokerCon 2019. And this is interesting because it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan in May. Just about right down the street from us. Looking forward to going to this one?
I am. All kinds of stuff. Panels and readings and film festival and costumed role play and awards.
And of course they'll have a big flea market area. I like buying obscure stuff at those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll have all kinds of vendors set up.
So if you're in or near Michigan in May, that may be one to try to look into. And of course, that's where they give away the Stoker Awards every year. StokerCon
2019.
And lastly, are you a fan of haunted houses?
I am. I don't know if I'm a fan of this haunted house or not.
There's a haunted house experience that is so outrageous and over the top that no one has ever finished it. And there's a waiting list of over 20,000 people. This is called McCamey Manor, and it's in San Diego, California.
Its admission is very exclusive. He only takes a limited number of people at a time and a limited number of times a year. Basically, you're living inside a horror movie.
It sounds to me like you go in there and you're volunteering to get tortured and beat up. This is not one of those hands-off, don't touch things.
Oh, they touch, yeah.
They'll tie you up. They'll make tarantulas crawl over your face.
Pour blood all over you. Hopefully not human blood, but be forced to eat, raw meat or, be threatened with it, insects. Literally tied up and gagged and prisoned. And
it's different every year. Some participants have been tied up, had their heads forced into a cage of snakes, eaten rotten eggs, and been gagged, bound, tied up, and had blood splattered all over them.
And it sounds like he just goes and goes until you give up, because nobody has made it through, supposedly.
Sounds to me like somebody's really into torture, and they found a way to make it pay.
He likes those torture-type horror movies and decided to make them real. Yeah.
There is something wrong with that guy.
Where do we sign up?
Yeah. Okay, that does sound like fun. Well, okay, no, actually it really doesn't.
That's McCamey Manor.
So if you're crazy into the horror movies, or the torture movies, or if you just want to get beat up,
or just want to see what it's like,
go check out McCamey Manor in San Diego.
And there will be a link in the show notes. You should check out the website. There's videos, there's information. It's something.
Yeah, it's something. And that's the news for this week. Okay, so next we're going to move over to a movie from 2008 called Shudder. PG-13, about an hour and a half, IMDb rating of 5.2 out of 10. This one stars Joshua Jackson, who I remember from the TV series Fringe. Have you seen him in anything else?
He was big on Dawson's Creek for a long time. I never watched that personally.
I never saw that either.
Those are the big two.
Okay.
He's been in a lot of stuff, though.
And also Rachel Taylor, who looked familiar, but I can't say I remember her in anything.
She keeps reminding me of Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
A blonder, younger Nicole Kidman.
And then there was also the third billed star is James Kyson Lee. He only had one scene as a spirit photographer, but he's fairly recognizable. He's been in lots of things.
You're waiting for me to say something, aren't you? Also, a notable face that I recognized was John Hensley, who plays Adam, a model recruiter, and he works with Ben, the main character. He was in Nip Tuck. He was the surgeon's son in that.
I didn't even have to look him up. He has a very distinctive look, and it just came right back to me where he was from.
Mm-hmm. He's kind of a weasel in this one. Okay,
Spoilers.
More than a weasel. Yes, spoilers. Oh, by the way, yes, there are spoilers here.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen this movie, we're going to spoil it.
And if you haven't seen this movie, you're not trying real hard, because it's been made 4 times.
It has.
This is actually a remake of a movie that came out in Thailand in 2004 called, surprisingly enough, Shutter. It was also made in India under the name Sivi, or Shivi, I'm not sure, in 2007. This was the 3rd remake. The American version was called Shutter from 2008, and then it was remade one more time in 2010 called Click, and this one was done in Hindi.
Another Indian version, but in the Hindi language specifically.
So I don't know if somebody got really happy with the licensing or if the copyright wasn't filed appropriately enough or something, but yeah, if you want to make a movie, this one seems to be available.
If you want to go for a 5th version of it.
Pick a language and redo it. It's a fairly low-budget movie. It had some interesting cinematography. It looked good in places, but it was just, shot in and around Tokyo, and nothing real fancy going on there.
It didn't have a lot of gore, didn't have a lot of violence, being PG-13. It did have some decent scares and some decent suspense.
Which we probably ought to point out at this point. It's kind of a standard ghost story. Someone dies, there's a ghost, and believe it or not, revenge happens.
She is vengeful, a vengeful ghost. Although it takes her a while to get venge.
Well, you got to scare people first and be all creepy for 2 hours before you start actually doing anything.
And let them feel guilty about it for 2 years.
So what happens in this movie?
It starts out with a happy event of Ben and June getting married. And they're happy, and they travel off to Japan, where at first I thought it was just a honeymoon in Japan. And it is. They honeymoon in a very nice cabin, take some photographs by the beautiful lake where they're staying, and there's some smudges, some white, mysterious defects in the photos.
Which is strange, because Ben is a highly paid professional photographer, and he shouldn't be making those kind of mistakes.
And they don't think anything of it. He thinks, it's just, smog or light or whatever, And anyway, it's not just their honeymoon in Japan. He's actually employed in Japan for a big advertising agency as a professional photographer.
But they don't get there yet. In the meantime, they're driving home late at night in a dark, deserted country road, far from anything, as usually happens in these stories.
It's raining.
And they're both
dark
half
and
asleep,
stormy night.
Distracted, talking over a map. June looks up from the steering wheel, and bam! They run over a Japanese girl, standing out in the middle of the road in her nightgown with her long black hair in the rain.
In the middle of the forest.
And she slowly slides up the windshield in a very sad face, as, vehicular accidents often do.
They run off the road.
Crash. They're stunned, they're knocked out for a little bit, and when they wake up, they're okay, but the girl is nowhere to be found.
It's also snowing when they wake up. And there's a lot of snow.
No
snowing
footprints.
Heavily. They also get out of the car and it immediately stops snowing, which I thought was kind of weird. Weather in Japan changes quickly. But I didn't see a whole lot of errors like that.
Low-budget snow is hard. It's more like it.
Yeah, to make it look realistic. But anyway, there's no sign of the girl. No, the police come. They look for the body. They look for evidence, footprints, blood, anything. There's nothing.
So they move on with their lives. They go off to Tokyo, where he works his photography job, and she apparently just is sightseeing at the moment. At one point, right after they get there, Jane has a creepy dream where the accident is reenacted. And not much happens for a few days until the honeymoon photos arrive. A couple of these shots also have a weird blur in them. Jane goes out sightseeing in Tokyo, and she takes
a camera with her, just randomly snapping interesting things that she sees. She goes to a pachinko parlor and
does selfies.
Various odd things. And sure enough,
they're blurry too.
They're kind of blurry with a white smudge and spirit photography.
She shows them to Ben in his studio, and Ben's assistant looks at them and says, "Oh, those are spirit photos."
And conveniently enough, her ex-boyfriend
just happens to run
a spirit photography
magazine.
Because that's a thing in Japan, apparently, in this movie anyway.
And it probably is, but what kind of coincidence is that?
And that's a heck of a coincidence. And it's a very specialized magazine. So Jane ends up going to this office where they produce this magazine, and she's sitting there on the couch, and she sees one of the guys working there faking a photo. And she's like, oh, these are all fake. There's no such thing as real ghosts. And the boyfriend says, oh, yes, they are, yes. They don't have enough photos to publish in the magazine, so they do fake some.
But he has a whole crazy wall full of real photos.
It's a crazy room. All the walls are full of what he thinks are real photos of ghosts.
And this is where he first starts explaining what these weird photos, these blurry photos are. He says they're spirit photos, and that basically it's all caused because strong emotions are making itself heard.
And also another convenient fact, there happens to be a medium that was recently interviewed for the magazine who lives nearby.
And when she tells Ben about this later on, Ben's like, we're not going to go see that crazy man. We're not dealing with mediums. And that's put on the burner for a while. That doesn't happen right yet. Unfortunately, Ben's $1 million photography job happens that day, and he's got all the models out on a staircase outdoors, taking really glamorous photos of them.
Yeah, it's a huge elaborate setup with elaborate costumes in front of the massive
the building where Ben works.
Building, yeah, because they're highlighting the business as well.
Ben thinks he sees a stranger in the photos as he's taking them in the camera. He looks up away from the camera and doesn't see this girl. He ignores it and takes his photos as usual. A little later on,
Ben is in the darkroom developing some of the photos, the preliminary shots from that photo shoot.
And sure enough, they're all blurry too, the same way. They have these bright smudges going off in random-looking directions.
And he sees a clearer image of the girl standing between a couple of the models. She moves in the photo, and some of the photographic fluid splashes up into his eyes, and he's freaking out and goes out, and he's got blood all over his face. And
meanwhile, Jane is on a train and sees this ghost in a reflection on the train window.
Like she's trying to tell her something.
She's convinced this thing is a ghost, and it's haunting her, and it's terrible, and it's bad. She confronts Ben about it, and Ben's like, nah, he's all in denial.
It's just a malfunctioning camera.
Yeah. Cameras do that.
Well, then it turns out that the main shots come back from the photo shoot, and they're all ruined. They're all smudgy and blurry and got white entrails all over them.
Now, at this point, we should point out that the ghost isn't showing up in these photos. These are just blurry photos, and it could be argued that, there's a bad camera or bad light. It's not like there's an obvious ghost in them. So their denials and their doubts kind of make sense.
But then Ben is doing some more puttering Ben is doing some more puttering in the studio, and Jane is humming in the background and touches the back of his neck and and he's like, not now, honey, I'm busy. And then the phone rings, and he goes and answers the phone, and it's Jane who's not there, and it was the ghost who has manifested to him.
And now he clearly sees the ghost.
Freaks out.
Totally freaks out.
Screams. Jane comes running from wherever she is. And there's a nice suspenseful moment where he's sitting there with his back to the door, and she's like, Ben. And you're thinking, oh, he's dead? And I was thinking, he can't be dead already. He's the star of the movie.
And she just spins him around, and he's just in shock.
Yeah.
He's fine, though.
Just a good suspense fright moment.
He's no longer doubting Jane and the ghost, though. He's convinced. So at this point, they both believe in the ghost. It's time to go see this medium. So they go see this medium who's this old man living alone, and he looks at him and explains a little more of the science behind the spirit photos. And he takes a photo and he touches it and holds it in his hand tightly and gets very upset. He yells at them in Japanese, which is completely not subtitled.
Jane doesn't speak Japanese. Ben is fluent.
And they get up and they leave in a hurry because something's not right. Now, it turns out we looked this up, that even though it wasn't subtitled and it never actually gets explained and it never actually gets explained in the movie, he says, "I cannot help you. She'll always be with you."
What you've done cannot be undone.
Which is kind of important to the plot, and why it wasn't subtitled or even explained in the movie seems like a mistake.
I bet they thought it would give away too much too soon, that Ben being involved.
They could have completely cut out the medium scene. Other than that, he doesn't really contribute anything to the story.
Not a lot.
He's kind of creepy and weird, but not that much. Okay, so they leave.
Oh, and another thing that's been going on, that's an important thing, although it doesn't seem like it at the time. Ben has been having neck pain, and he thinks it's from the accident. He crimped his neck or something in the accident when the car went off the road. And it doesn't clear up. He goes to the hospital, and he gets weighed in and part of the examination, and the nurse is like fiddling with the scale, like she can't get it to work right, and she's scowling and has him step on it a couple times. He sees the doctor, who doesn't find anything wrong, gives him some pain medication, sends him on his way. That's an ongoing thing with the neck pain.
Which seems like it's not terribly important at this point, but it comes back.
But it's a thing.
Okay, meanwhile, Jane is looking through the photos, the fancy photo shoot photos, and she's noticing that all the blurs on the photos seem to be in front of that office building.
In one specific corner of the building.
Yeah, so she goes to the office building, to the 18th or 17th floor, and she goes to investigate. And she's smart, she takes along her Polaroid, because the ghost only seems to show up in photos.
You can't fake a Polaroid.
Well, at least that's what they say in the movie.
You can't fake a Polaroid, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She encounters the ghost, and in a panic, she knocks down a photo off the wall.
No, actually, the ghost did that.
The ghost did that, okay.
Yeah,
that makes more sense. It's
she was across the room. It fell by itself. Well,
Okay.
Mogami, the ghost, did it. The photo is a group photo.
The photo is a group photo, but immediately Jane looks at the photo and she instantly recognizes one of the girls in the photo is the ghost.
The one that she hit on the road.
The one she hit on the road. She got a good look at her on the road as she slid up the windshield slowly and painfully.
Mm-hmm.
And the photo says that the girl's name is Megumi. And more importantly, there's a label on the back of the photo saying the photo was taken by Ben. So Jane runs home and she confronts Ben, and he explains about Megumi's past. They were romantically involved, but he didn't love her.
And she went crazy, obsessive. She was stalker girlfriend, clingy. He couldn't get rid of her.
So he says he talked to his friends, and the friends told her to stop, and the friends did it, and Ben never saw her again.
The explanation seemed a little weak at the time, I thought, but Jane buys it, pretty much.
And in my notes right at this point, I've got a little asterisk that says it's pretty easy to guess what happened at this point.
Well, not exactly, though. There's suspects. You think, well, Ben might have done something to this girl, or Adam or Bruno might have done something to this girl. They're all kind of suspects.
Yeah, they're three friends. It's kind of obvious early on that in their past lives they've all been like dating around and doing all kinds of crazy partying.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben he's a good guy. He's reformed now, apparently. The other two, not so much.
Yeah, Ben is back in Japan after 2 years. He was there previously with these two guys, Bruno, who works for the company, and Adam, who works for the modeling agency.
So anyway, since Megumi's name came up, Ben calls his boss, Bruno, and asks him what happened with Megumi. Bruno says, oh, he just saw her yesterday. She was out in a crowd and pointed at him.
It was kind of creepy, but, he just didn't think much of it and just kept on walking.
And at this point, we don't know if he's telling the truth and this woman is out actually in the crowd pointing at him, or if maybe he saw the ghost.
I think he was telling the truth. I think she appeared to him.
Could be.
That was the take I had on it. But
Okay.
he thinks she's still alive.
Yeah.
All's good.
And then we cut away to the other friend, Adam, who runs the modeling agency, and he's doing a photo shoot.
A, quote, audition, end quote.
A scantily clad girl's half naked getting her photo taken.
He has a chick stripped down to her underwear.
And he's got his camera up there and doing the camera thing, click, 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 click.
He gives her a cowboy hat, too, because, he tells her, you need some fashion if you really want to be a fashion model. And
Well,
it's just
yeah.
very stereotypical of, he's got a box of scantily clad model photos that he just does this all the time.
This is part of his routine, you can tell.
He's a scumbag, yeah.
And anyway, the camera explodes and gouges out his eye.
Well, before that, he was seeing the ghost in the camera, through the camera lens, and there was
Did he see the ghost, or that's just something we see?
No, he was seeing, and he was kind of rubbing his eyes like he was seeing things. And there's also a very cool shot where he's kind of holding the camera off to the side. I noticed, and you can very clearly see the ghost in the viewfinder on the camera.
Yeah, but he didn't see that. It was why I asked that.
Yeah, he was seeing just little blurs and stuff. But then the camera explodes in his eye, and
he doesn't see anything after that.
Yeah, and it kills him.
Yeah.
No longer a suspect, you think?
So anyway, Bruno, the boss, calls Ben and tells him, hey, Adam just died at the hospital. And not long after that, Bruno hangs up the phone and starts to go a little bit crazy, it looks like. We don't see really what happens there, but sure enough, Megumi is in Bruno's hotel room. Ben and Jane then go to Bruno's house. Bruno is very upset. He doesn't say anything. He walks out of the bedroom like a zombie, takes a look at Jane, charges at her, runs right past her, and jumps off the balcony off the 40th floor window of his apartment. Splat.
He's destroyed his apartment, and he took all of the framed photos hanging on his wall and sliced them up into itsy-bitsy pieces. So something happened there where the ghost drove him crazy, or guilt drove him crazy, or something. But he does a nice, graceful belly flop onto
Concrete.
Kind of bloody, yeah.
Splat.
Yeah, definitively dead.
Okay, so everything's fine and well after that for about an hour, probably. They go home, and they find a FedEx package by their door that Jane opens up, and find out that their wedding photos have finally arrived.
And they're beautiful, except there's a ghost in the background, which means the ghost...
The problem is, the wedding happened before the car crash. So this ghost was with them long before the car crash. The car crash, it wasn't about the car crash.
It was clearly, Jane realizes that she did not kill the girl at the car crash. She was already a ghost, haunting Ben at that point, at the wedding.
So they got to find out what's going on. So they go to Megumi's house where she used to live. Ben knows where she used to live because they dated for a while, like he said. They go inside, and they find her body. She had taken poison a long while before, and she was pretty ate up with the flies. Thousands of flies around.
Apparently she owned the house or paid the rent in advance, because she'd been there a while.
A long while.
Yeah, pretty mummified.
Long before the traffic accident.
Mm-hmm. But again, it was one of those nice suspenseful moments where she's sitting, they go in and she's sitting there in a chair in one of the far rooms, and Megumi, hi. And then they get to her, and Jane touches her on the shoulder, and her head falls off.
Yeah.
She's so decayed.
It's a total Norman Bates moment there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So they go home after all this, and Megumi is still with them. That night...
Well, they think that it's cleared up because the medium said, well, the ghost is tied to the flesh. You take care of the body, that's a big thing. And so they do that. They give a funeral, and she gets cremated, and they think, it's all gone. And she took care of Adam and Bruno, apparently, who were, who she was mad at.
So they go home, and Megumi is still with them. Megumi that night wakes Ben up through mysterious means. He gets up, goes looking, and he finds Megumi in the house. She corners him as he runs away, crawling away, falling down like a little girl in the Jason movies. He backs up into the corner. She grabs him, sticks her tongue down his throat.
Gross.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it's like
a long, gross, disgusting,
a foot
rotten
long
tongue.
and decayed, and yeah.
One of the better scenes of the movie, actually.
Yeah.
June wakes up, notices that he's not in bed, turns around, and Ben's on the floor choking to death on thousands and thousands of flies. Another kind of gross scene.
And ghost drool.
And ghost drool, yes. June can't help Ben. He won't stop choking. So she gets all pumped up and she yells to Megumi that, "Stop this, Ben has never loved you." And the attack stops. It's all over. She's fixed the problem. The next day, they have a funeral for Megumi, and she's cremated.
And if you ever watch Supernatural,
That's the end of the
cremating
ghost.
the body takes care of the ghost.
Burn the bones.
And apparently it's all settled. Thank goodness.
Well, since his boss and his partner have all been killed, they are out of work. They go back home to the USA. Was that San Francisco? I saw a big bridge.
It was New York.
It was New York. Okay.
Yeah.
So they go home. No ghosts over here. Except Megumi has followed them.
Yeah.
Jane takes some photos that morning when they get home, and sure enough, she sees Megumi crawling around the floor, and then she stands up. She does the whole thing with a pile of photos like a flip book, which is kind of good thinking. But after the ghost crawls around on the floor, she stands up and walks into the wall. Jane then goes and opens the closet on the other side of the wall and starts digging for, well, whatever she can find.
And what she finds is Ben's luggage from when he returned 2 years ago from Japan. This is their old apartment, his old apartment.
And inside the camera is a memory card, which Jane then plugs into the computer and looks at. What is on the card?
It is photos of Bruno and Adam posing with Megumi, forcing themselves on her. Kissing, hugging, smooching, selfie, not outright sex in the photos, but it's clear that they were molesting her. And who's the photographer? Who do you think? Well, it's Ben's camera. So Ben comes home and Jane's a little upset. "Honey, what's wrong?" And she shows him the photos. And then he spills the whole beans.
She wouldn't stop stalking him, so Ben, Adam, and Bruno drug her, take photos of her, compromising photos of her to use as blackmail so she'll stop bothering Ben.
They tell her that we're going to show these photos to your coworkers and to your mother, except they start getting carried away, and Bruno and Adam do outright rape her. Ben stops photographing at that point, but he just sits there and watches. He doesn't stop them or help.
Ben's not quite bad enough to participate, but he's bad enough not to stop them. So, is he as guilty as the others? Well, he's not dead yet, so we're not quite sure.
And then she is so shamed and angry by this that she goes and kills herself.
Mitsumi did, yeah. She took the poison several months ago and is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at this point, Jane has had enough. She says, "Oh, Megumi wasn't threatening me. She was warning me about you, Ben."
What kind of man you are.
Yeah. So Jane leaves Ben. She storms out, slams the door, and she won't stop. Ben then freaks out. Ben calls out Megumi, freaking out, and he freaks out, trying to call her back.
Goes around the apartment photographing with a Polaroid, trying to get her on film so he can find out where she is.
And then we see in one shot that he figures out why his back has been hurting him all this time.
He throws the camera in a rage, and the camera discharges and takes a photo of him, and she's sitting on his shoulders.
The weight of the world, or at least the weight of Megumi, has been on his back for months.
And it was some physical weight, too, because it was messing up the scale. It shows a montage of, this neck pain, and the scale that was showing his weight being really screwy. And
so he does what any intelligent photographer would do. He pulls out hot, burning flash bulbs, waving them towards his back, and burns himself on the neck to scare her off.
A well-known cure for ghosts, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't.
But it doesn't work.
It was like an industrial-size mega flash, and he took the safety cover off.
And cranked it up to 11.
And actually cranked it, to 11, touched it on his neck and discharged it. Huge searing burn on the side of his neck.
And he screams and he's burnt and all that. But that's not quite enough because the ghost is still there. So he breaks the flash bulb, rips out the wires, sticks the bare wires onto his neck, and electrocutes himself.
I think he's not thinking clearly at that point. It's like, what's electricity going to do to a ghost at this point?
Okay, but he doesn't die. Instead, he's institutionalized. I don't know, they think he's crazy or Maybe he's damaged his brain or something. But
Well, I was wondering about that. He's sitting there like he's totally brain dead. He's all slumped over sitting on the bed. There's a nurse brings in a tray of food, like a full meal. So he must be capable of feeding himself. And the door doesn't seem to be locked. It's a little unclear if he's mad or
he's
brain dead.
hospitalized and he ain't quite right.
Yeah, something's wrong there.
And as the door shuts, we see that Megumi is still on his back. The end.
Reflected in the window.
In the glass,
Yeah.
yes. So I thought it was a pretty good movie.
What would you give it? IMDb gives it a 5.2 out of 10. What do you think?
I would say it was a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah.
I mean, I figured out probably 2/3 of the way through what exactly had happened.
Or pretty close.
You
There was
couldn't
a
be
lot of
completely sure of the
foreshadowing.
details.
Right. Yeah, you know these guys had done something. Maybe, one of them had done something and the others were covering. You just didn't know for sure. It was a little bit, there was a little bit of predictability there. But decent acting, decent effects.
And you mentioned early on that there was no gore involved. Very little gore.
Yeah, not
But
much.
the ghost herself didn't actually kill anyone directly. She made one guy's camera explode, the other guy jumped out of a balcony, and the other guy electrocuted himself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she just wasn't all that physical. In some of these movies, the ghosts can, affect the real world, and some of them they can't.
She had very little. She did knock the picture off the wall. That was pretty clear.
Whatever happened to that camera that exploded?
But, and when Jane was fighting her off after Ben was choking, she was kind of choking Jane with curtains a little bit. But actually, it was pretty low-key as far as real-world interaction. Mostly it was guilt and driving these people crazy.
Well, like I said early on, this one's got a 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb. But the original one, the Thailand version, had a 7.1 out of 10. Now I kind of want to go see that one.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I was reading one interesting point. The director of this, okay, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, Masayuki Ochai.
Masayuki Ochai.
Okay, the director barely spoke any English, and he directed. I mean, that would be an extra level of challenge in directing a movie.
You got to trust your actors a lot.
You got to trust your actors that they're saying the right words the right way. But he spoke some English, but not enough. He had to have a translator on the set, and he directed through a translator and through his broken English.
Well, overall, I'd say it was an entertaining hour and a half.
Yeah,
it was
I'd say
definitely
so.
not a great classic, but it was worth the time.
So anyway, that was the movie Shutter. Overall, we would recommend it, although we have totally spoiled it for you, and you know how it ends. But maybe you could check out one of the other 3 versions and tell us what you think of those.
Tell us which one's best.
And make your own 5th version of it.
With puppets.
That's just silly.
And now for our short film of this week, we have one called The Smiling Man, made by Alter in 2015. And the tagline for this one is, "A little girl home alone finds herself face to face with pure evil." It's about 6.5 minutes long on YouTube. We'll have a link in the show notes. And what'd you think of The Smiling Man?
I don't know if I can say more about it than that, because that's kind of the story. But overall, very good. Cinematography, really interesting. A lot of different changes of the camera angles. Whoever was the cinematographer really knew what they were doing, I thought. Yeah, very, very simple story. A little girl. Creepy.
A little girl walks up and finds a creature. That's the entire story.
Creepy, suspenseful. You don't know what's going to happen to a little girl, and
good things do happen.
Good makeup.
Yeah, he looked interesting.
Yes. This is called the Uncensored, and I don't know what they would have censored for a censored version. It really wasn't.
There's no speech. Nobody talks.
And there's no language. There's no nudity. Okay. Not gonna say what else there is, but yeah.
Anything that would have been censored would have pretty much killed the story, though.
It would have, yeah.
I don't see the point
It
of
was
censoring it.
all necessary. But overall, I'd give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, The Smiling Man by Alter. Check it out on YouTube. Show notes will have it.
6 minutes worth your time.
Yeah, definitely cool. Okay, and that's our short for this week.
Yeah. We saw a new movie. Have you seen a new movie lately?
We see a new movie every week. However, we do listen to your feedback, and after the first 2 episodes, we've decided that with our new movies, we'll be doing fewer spoilers. We're not going to walk you through the entire movie and give away the ending. We probably will have some spoilers for the old movie segment of the show, but for the new ones, we're going to behave ourselves and limit spoilers.
So you'll have to see the new movies yourself.
Yeah. If you haven't seen things like Leprechaun and Shudder by now, well, you should have. But the new movies, we're going to stop spoiling, because we're just good people like that.
On the other hand, the movie we're about to talk about, you probably have seen, because a lot of people have seen this one.
But it's one of those movies you don't want to see, because if you do, you'll kill yourself.
Or start killing other people. Was
That's
that a spoiler?
really not a great recommendation, is it? Okay, we're talking about The Bird. Late 2018 release on Netflix.
It's called Birdbox.
What did I just say?
The Bird.
Wow.
We're talking about
Birdbox. Okay.
a Netflix original.
Starring Sandra Bullock, John Malkovich, Trevante Rhodes, and Sarah Paulson.
And some other people.
And some other people.
Other people you'll recognize. They actually put a lot of money into the cast, I bet.
The cast was good.
Even the lesser characters are people that you recognize from other stuff.
Somewhat. Okay, so if you've ever seen the trailers for Bird Box, you've got the premise already.
And you've got the premise about in half an hour into the movie. Pretty much, I think that's where it started diverging off, where into completely new territory.
I don't know. I don't think the entire movie had too many surprises from the trailer. If you saw the trailer, you know what's going on.
You get the gist.
Something has happened. There's some kind of creatures that came to Earth or appeared, or we really don't know. And if you look at them, you suddenly go crazy and kill yourself. This happens in the first 30 seconds of the movie, just about, so this is not a spoiler. This is the whole premise of the movie. So, the main characters spend almost the entirety of the movie running around in the dark in blindfolds.
And I saw that Sandra Bullock actually filmed about half of it blindfolded, she said. About 50% of it. She was literally blindfolded.
Well, they had to be blindfolded. It's not like they're going to have CGI blindfolds or anything.
But that's tricky to act blindfolded.
It's tricky to act not blindfolded.
Yeah. Anyway, she wasn't faking it. Yeah. The director offered to let her cut holes in it so she could see, and she didn't want to.
More realistic that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she's good in this. She's badass. She's tough, and yeah, I liked her a lot in this.
Okay, so the movie starts out, first few minutes, we start out with Sandra Bullock's character, Mallory, and her sister, Jessica. And Mallory is a very self-involved, isolated artist. Maybe even bordering on autistic a little bit, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't like dealing with people. She doesn't like contact of any kind with anybody other than her sister. And she's pregnant. We never hear about who the father is, and apparently she doesn't really care. She doesn't want the kids. It just sort of happened. And they go to the obstetrician at the hospital to check on the baby. Again, this is all right in the very beginning. And on their way out,
things start to fall apart.
Very quickly, things fall apart.
There had been hints about it on the news in other countries.
Yeah, this stuff had been going on in Eastern Europe and Russia for a few days, but America was supposed to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then when America stopped being safe, it went to hell like fast.
Very apocalyptic. And was it original? I mean, was there anything new? I mean, I kept seeing things that reminded me a lot of other movies. Have you seen The Happening, where something mysterious makes people go crazy?
I was more comparing it in my mind to The Quiet Place.
There was a lot of that
where
too.
people would run around and you had to be absolutely silent or the monsters would get you.
And here you can't look at the monsters. You
Or
have to
the
be
monsters will
blindfolded.
get you. It's a different gimmick.
A different sense, but there were some similarities. Yeah.
And The Happening also, you're right, looking back on that one.
And then people, of course, survivors holding up and fighting to survive, literally.
Like Night of the Living Dead kind of style. A bunch of different people living in one big house trying to stay alive.
I thought they did a really nice job with that the characters seemed very distinctly different. There was the grumpy guy, there was the cynic, the drug addict, the kind of loopy girl, the tough woman, and distinctly different characters.
Yeah, if you've ever seen a movie that has a bunch of survivors trying to live together in a tight, cramped house, and they all hate each other or half panicking, there's always one logical one. There's always one guy, the end of the world is coming, we're all going to die. Then there's one person who's just panicking all the time. It's the usual assortment of survivors.
Mm-hmm. And all played very well.
Probably the most notable survivor is John Malkovich, who's this old man who he's the "we're gonna die" character, and at one point in the movie he says while they're drinking that he's never wrong, and you know what? He never is.
He wasn't.
He was right all along.
Pretty much.
Okay, so the movie itself flash forwards to the present day and flashes back to 5 years ago. 5 years ago is when she's pregnant with her child, and the present is when she hears a radio announcement that there's this sanctuary place at the end of the river.
Which you see the river in the trailer.
Yeah.
So that's not a spoiler.
So there's two storylines here. What happens at the outbreak of this situation, and what happens as she tries to get to this sanctuary place at the end of the river.
And what happened to all the other people, because, it's just her and the kids on the river.
Yeah, it's very obvious by the river that everyone else is gone somewhere, somehow, and we learn how that happens.
We're not telling. You
No,
have to
we're
see
not
for
telling.
yourself. Because there are some surprises. It's not that I meant to say it was unoriginal. It's just a lot of things reminded me of stuff from other movies that they kind of mishmash together.
Yeah, you'd almost immediately just assume that throughout the movie, the creatures, monsters, whatever you want to call them, are picking off people one by one, and that's not really the case.
More complicated than that.
It is much more complicated than that.
Yeah, and overall very entertaining.
What
I thought they put
do you
it
think of
together
the actors and the performances?
terrific.
I thought they were all very good.
Yes, I was very impressed with Sandra Bullock and the whole supporting cast and the kids.
Oh, the kids
Yeah.
are especially... every horror movie I've ever seen has obnoxious kids that you can't wait till they die.
And here you're actually rooting for the kids.
The kids listen and do what they're
and
told.
they're sweet and
They don't cry and scream and be annoying throughout.
They're kind of smart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's really unusual for kids in a horror movie.
It's refreshing. Yeah, those kid actors, and they're very young, and yeah, they did a terrific job.
Well, they're written that way. It's not just the actors.
No, but yeah,
I can't
for
think
being
of
such
any
young
horror
actors.
movie that had kids of that age where the kids are not obnoxious.
And there are some where I have outright rooted for, like, oh, please kill off this kid. Yeah.
The Babadook. Oh,
Yeah.
man, I wanted that kid to get eaten so bad. But it didn't happen. Okay, so what do you think? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Got any good trivia?
I give it a thumbs up.
I definitely give it a thumbs up. I've seen a lot of really bad reviews on this. And the only spoiler that I think we probably ought to give is that it's never explained what's going on, really.
And I think that's where a lot of the bad reviews are coming from. People are angry because why wasn't this fully explained?
You get
And
a
it's
lot
not.
of it that you can pick up throughout the story.
And you can piece it together yourself, but I think people were angry about having to piece it together themselves.
Yeah, I'm not going to say more than that.
But I think that was part of its appeal is you did piece it together yourself as it goes on.
Yeah. But if they want to make a Birdbox 2, they totally could because they didn't give away all the secrets.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh, that's a spoiler. Not everybody dies at the end either.
Well,
You're saying there could be a Bird Box 2, and
even
Somebody
so, you could do a
survives.
different story with the same world.
yeah, they could.
I mean,
yeah.
there have to be other survivors other places.
Yes, generally.
So even if all these people never came back for a sequel, somebody could make one.
somebody else. Well, like they did with Walking Dead, they got the main Walking Dead people, and then they got a whole other place in the country that the same
Fear
thing
the
happened
Walking
to.
Dead,
Oh,
yeah.
Fear the Walking
Exactly,
Dead.
yeah. So you recommend it? Thumbs up?
I would give it a thumbs up.
How many out of 10?
I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
That's where I go. I go with a 7 or an 8 also.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the reviewers really gave it lower reviews, but I thought it was pretty good overall.
I thought it, I thought without it being explained that it was intriguing, wondering, are these aliens? Are they an invading force? Are they friendly? And
Are they aliens?
They just want to be friends, and like there's this horrible reaction that they accidentally have with humans, or are they malicious with the intent of taking over Earth, or we just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is part of the interesting part of it. You're left to, use your imagination. Where did these things come from? Why are they here? What
did
do
they come
want?
out of a hole in the ground, or we don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 2018's Birdbox from Netflix. Go out and buy it right now. Oh, you don't have to buy it because it's on Netflix.
You should watch it right now.
Definitely should go see that.
Yes. It's the sun coming up. Means the show is over.
Oh, no.
Another night at the drive-in is empty. I mean,
no one comes to our drive-in.
Another night at the drive-in is over.
We're going to have to get going. Sun's coming up. So the drive-in is closing down for the weekend.
Take your popcorn with you and get out.
Stop in during the week, though, at horrorbulletin.com, where we'll have updates and fun stuff posted. Check out our Twitter feed and contact us if you want to. If there's a hot new movie coming up you're looking into, an old movie you'd seriously recommend, or just a horrible movie that you want to complain about, drop us an email or give us a contact. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And pick up your snacks before you leave the drive-in. See you next time.
See ya.